because that's where they started. Microtransactions started on mobile games, and at first we were kind of like, well, it's a mobile game, and it was started by all these indie companies that were like trying to get some money, and you're like, you know, you play the game halfway through, and then you hit a paywall, and you're like, yeah, I'm done playing the game. That's what it was, and then it started coming on to console games, and then PC games, and then it's come to this point right now where companies are struggling. They're trying to balance the gameplay with the microtransactions, as evidenced by the controversy of the new Assassin's Creed Odyssey game. And to be fair, that game is a whole hell of a lot of fun, extremely addicting, and I haven't had this much fun playing a game probably since The Witcher, and that's big. That's saying something big. Now, it's not as good as The Witcher, of course, but there are
But you're
elements,
having fun.
I'm having fun, and there are elements where it's obviously they took a lot of inspiration from games like The Witcher. You know, they took the good parts of The Witcher, and in some cases, it's actually more fun than The Witcher because you get to climb and assassinate shit. You know, that's pretty cool. And the world is humongous, the graphics are great, but then this controversy came about saying that the game is really grindy, and the game is really grindy. But the grind is super fun. We had this conversation a while back where he said, as long as the grind is fun and you're having fun doing it, and it doesn't feel like it's a chore, then you're on the right track. And Assassin's Creed achieves that to a certain extent. But the problem therein lies is, what kind of player are you? Are you the type of player that just wants to do all the missions and just speed through the game, which a lot of people do? And Assassin's Creed, let's be honest, has historically had a gameplay style that doesn't have a lot of side quests. You know, they had like a little bit of side quests here and there, but you know, you can mainly just, because it was an adventure game first and foremost, and then they started adding more and more RPG elements to it, and now essentially it's full-blown RPG. It is 100% open world role-playing game, multiple dialogue choices and consequences to those choices, although they're not as expansive as the games like The Witcher or Dragon Age, but you know, still there are consequences to your choices. And in any case, Ubisoft decided to add in a $10 XP permanent XP booster, which will boost your experience that you gain 50% forever. Until you delete the game, or I guess even if you delete the game and buy it again, you just have it forever.
Sure.
And so the controversy isn't that essentially monetizing a gameplay mode? Isn't that essentially monetizing easy mode? You know, when you put in a game, you say, go into options and you go easy, normal, hard, and you go, I want to play easy. And but like in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you still have that option. You can still play it on easy and normal and hard. But then you can even get it. You can get it even easier if you pay the $10 extra to cheat a little bit. So it's not a problem for me. And you know me, I love playing games on easy, and I like my hand being held. You know,
sure.
So it hasn't been a problem, and it's been super fun. But the danger of monetizing gameplay styles it's looming heavily.
Right. Because the worry is that they're going to make a game. I really liked one of the lines, and I think it might have been Kotaku or one of the articles that you sent me were sending this there. Basically, you're paying to solve a problem that the publisher has created with slow and controlled leveling. In other words, the problem was that part of the grinding wasn't fun. And they capitalized, instead of fixing that and making it more fun, they said, well, what if we made it so you could pay and skip the part that's not fun? And that's not the right, not ever the right, I guess, question to ask, or the right decision that should be made. And it's a very, very slim difference between that, something where it looked like they made a fun game, and then they were like, some people don't want to grind, let them pay this. There's very difference between that and somebody that's like, hey, I made a crappy game, and if you want it to be fun, you're going to have to inject money into it. Yeah. That's like a backwards value system.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's getting gamers to kind of turn on each other. I saw like a little Twitter beef between two of the people that I respect the most in the gaming world, and it's Yang Ye, who's just fantastic, I guess, YouTube journalist, if you will. He's spot on every video that he makes. And he's really fair, really respectable, usually. And then Jason Schreier, who's like one of the best journalists in gaming, I think. And they got into a little bit of a beef because Yang Ye said microtransactions are predatory. And he was referring to Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Jason Schreier disagreed and then said something kind of snide against, like, basically generalizing all YouTubers, saying that, they're using this. I'm paraphrasing, of course, out of respect, but something along the lines of the microtransactions in Assassin's Creed aren't the worst thing in the world. But I guess that's not that's not good for your YouTube headline or something like that, and Yang Ye took a little bit of offense to that. And he was
those
just like,
YouTube fighting words, man.
He was like, hey man, like, I have something to say and it has substance to it. And I totally agree with him. And, I think, Jason Schreier has a point. I think Yang Ye has a point, because the microtransactions in Assassin's Creed aren't exactly predatory, but they're getting, peeping, like the Predator, like, oh sorry, that's a bad joke. Like, they're peeping through the window, they have the telescope through the window, and they're looking at the neighbor changing and unchanging.
It's so great. It's so great. It's so great that you thought of a visual that our viewers could understand, that they could relate to.
It's like To Catch a Predator. Okay.
They're peeping, Shane.
They are. I will say this: they are testing the waters.
They have, and that is there's this big frontier of, like, options, I guess, the developers have that are new options, and they're rooted in, like, studies that are based in psychology, and they're thinking, like, what's the most possible amount of money that we can take from people, basically, is the question they're asking.
Right.
And I remember when the Battlefront 2 controversy was a major microtransaction puzzle that everybody was kind of trying to navigate. And EA's position was, if you don't want to buy Darth Vader, you can unlock Darth Vader after 40 hours of gameplay. And people made fun of that. And I remember thinking, we can all think of games that were so fun that we played way more than 40 hours of gameplay. Mm-hmm. We put way more than 40 hours into it, right? Mm-hmm. So when people got mad and they were like, at first you might look at that and think, well, who are these entitled players that they should be the ones to decide 40 hours is too long to get, what we want? Who are these entitled players? But then what they're really saying was this fear of, what if the game sucks? What if I don't want to play it for 40 hours?
Right.
And so it kind of goes back to, like, if from the get-go their whole purpose was to make a fun game, none of this would matter. You would be happy. There's plenty of fun games that have microtransactions that people are happy to play. But then there's other games that they have kind of handicapped or hobbled, and then said, if you want, you can pay this money and, like, get extra. And there was a study done, I remember, with these monkeys, where they give these monkeys over here an apple, and they're all like, hey, cool, I have an apple. And then they give these monkeys over here 2 apples, and then they take one away. And those monkeys just flipped out. They weren't having that at all. And so they use that as the basis to say, they've even done these other studies, and they're like, gamers, what is the type of advertising that you hate the most? What do you not mind and what do you hate the most? And when they say, well, we don't mind if we're playing a game and we're swinging through in Spider-Man and we see a Texaco logo on a building, we don't mind that, right?
Yeah, don't really care.
But if we're playing a game and then the game gets chopped off, and they're like, stop, you have to pay now. Like, you if you want to keep going, you have to pay now. And that's the taking the apple away that enrages people and absolutely makes them so mad. You're, like, psychologically designed. And the study said people hate that kind of advertising the most. And of course, it's almost like you're supposed to hate that kind of advertising the most, because that's how they're going to get you to make it go away. You're going to want to spend money, and you're going to want to escape.
Yeah. Wow, that's a great. That hits the nail right on the head, because you're absolutely right.
That they're almost, Shane, don't underestimate that this is like the video games are the money maker now. Like video games make way more money than movies do. Music. So of course there's going to be a conglomeration of all of these different fields of study. Even psychologists are going to say, hey, we've studied this and we find that if you do this in this color, you can take more money from people. People are just going to jump on that.
Right. But it's to your point that video games are the money making, the money maker now. They really are, because Red Dead Redemption 2 just came out and it had the biggest opening weekend of anything ever in entertainment history. That's movies. That's anything. That's anything.
Yeah, that's insane. Grand Theft Auto 5 made $6 billion. Or has made $6 billion over its lifetime. That's billion with a B, which is more than like the highest grossing movie all time, highest grossing anything of all time. It's just, there's a lot of potential here. And so we're going to have a lot in one way, it's like, ooh, a golden age. Maybe we're going to see some good games. And another way, it's like, all of the evil people who have ruined all your other things that you loved are going to come to video games now, and they're going to ruin that now.
Yeah, that brings up the point. It's like, is it just sort of inevitable that, any company that is in business, whatever, it doesn't matter how, the company starts off good, it's really consumer friendly, starts doing, really good things. And, I'm going to Amazon, Apple, like they do really great consumer things. And then eventually they get so big that, they have to infinitely grow because they're a company, they have investors and stocks and all that stuff. And, they need to do better than the year before. So is it inevitable that eventually they start becoming not consumer friendly and start becoming predatory, because now they've hit a goal so high that they can't possibly reach it through just regular innovation? They have to innovate ways to cheat people out of their money in order to hit that goal.
They're really the turning point, I think, for those companies is when, regardless of what, because they can put out a bad computer and whatever, they haven't really done that much damage to the world, right? Mm-hmm. But when they stifle innovation from others, in other words, when they have enough money that they can kind of like monopolize that area and make it so that anyone else that wants to do something like they're doing but better, and that's one area in which like it's people like the guy that made Minecraft can come up with like something really cool and it be their pet project and make a huge amount of money. And we're there in video games where innovation actually kind of works. But it may come a time when there's not a lot of like garage indie games being made that are worth anything, and really the only options that we have for fun games are games that have thousands and thousands of names in the credits and just these AAA, I guess, titles that really at that point we get mad because it's like we don't have any other options. We have to yell at this game and all its flaws because there's nowhere else we can go to.
Right.
So
yeah. And yeah, it kind of, yeah. And, I was thinking about this, and, I've kind of said this before when we talked, I can't remember what we talked about, but I feel like this is a problem because video games haven't gone up in price in like 20 years, and with inflation and all that stuff. I remember reading something like, how much was Legend of Zelda when it came out in 1989? And how much would it have been if it came out today, technically? And it was something like $100. It was $100. It was a $100 game that we bought, but it was $50 in '89 because of the price point, whatever, and economics, which I know very little of. But so what do you think that a company would benefit from just going, you know what? We've heard video gamers, we heard your complaints about microtransactions and loot boxes and all that stuff, and we're just not going to do any sort of microtransactions whatsoever, no predatory. We might do some microtransactions that are like clothes and fun stuff like that have nothing to do with gameplay. But for the most part, no microtransactions. However, the game is going to be $75. Now, would a company benefit from that, or would no one buy the game because everyone would well, I'm not going to pay $75 for a game that I've been paying $60 for a game for the past 20 years.
I would, sometimes when people talk about, that price point of $60 and how like it's really throttling people that want to charge more and stuff, kind of forget that the price of a video game is also determined by the market. That really there's these two blades of a pair of scissors called supply and demand that are coming together at a price point that really one person doesn't have a lot of power over. Now, there are plenty of I can even think of games that I've spent well more on $75 because the microtransactions were things that I wanted, or I wanted to reward that game for being, if you added up all the cool cars that I bought in Rocket League, just it's well more than the price of the game, because it was my way of telling them, great job.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, the benefit of microtransactions is that you're able to pay some and then get some value and kind of really get an idea for how you're going to like the game. I don't like the idea of, okay, I've never played a game before, but you want me to pay $75 for it, sight unseen. I don't really like that. But if you make me pay half now and then I play the game, right? And I'm not going to say, it's not going to be like that one game, Asura's Wrath, where they hide the ending of the ending. It's a Frontier. It's just absolutely crazy out there. They hide the ending of the game behind a paywall. So you play the entire game, and then you have to pay $6.99 if you want to, I think, like fight a boss and see a cutscene, basically. It was what that kind of boiled down to. And so people describe, I guess, a value of a video game in different ways. If it's a good video game, it's worth not only by money, but like years later, my time when I go back and I play through it again and I have a lot of fun. And it doesn't matter that there's, if there's like some DRM that's preventing me to do that, then that makes the game less valuable now. And, they would teach us when I used to sell windows and I used to sell cars, and they would tell us, you don't just start talking to the customer and say, this is how, or anything. It could be like, on the show Property Brothers. They don't go in and say, this house is $800,000. They say, look at this living room, look at this bathroom, look at this, and you get a value inside your head. And once you've built enough value, then you throw out the $800,000, and they get to decide if the value is more or less. And so that really, we don't have like demo discs anymore. I kind of wish it was a little easier. I kind of wish sometimes you could. It's kind of weird to say, okay, here Red Dead Redemption is like 100 gigs worth of game. It's a little difficult to just like send you a small piece of it and see if you want to play it.
Right.
So you kind of have to go at that point. You kind of have to go. But it's an interesting idea, and it's an interesting, I guess, market. And I don't. If all the big name players now have made so much by microtransactions, I don't see any of them saying, we're going to put a hard stop to that whole us getting more money thing, because expansion packs have been around forever, right? Nobody got mad about this when it was expansion pack.
All right, well, maybe we can delineate between, what kind of microtransactions we're talking about here, because I don't think there's any I think there's a difference between microtransactions. Well, maybe there's not, because I guess technically in the broader term, microtransactions, DLC is also a part of that, because it's extra, and you're paying for an extra piece of the game that didn't come with the base game. But I think there's a difference between, the regular small little loot boxes and the small little items, the clothing and all that stuff, and regular big expansion packs, like, let's say, CD Projekt Red. CD Projekt Red doesn't really have much in terms of little microtransactions here and there that I can remember. Maybe there are. Am I wrong? I might be wrong.
There's the same kind of, I guess, elements are at play. And maybe you're right that we do need to kind of delineate, okay, this is when we're talking about these microtransactions, and this is, but when I say like nobody ever got mad about expansion packs, is because that really seemed like a two-way street that was benefiting both. The developers had more ideas for the game, and even after the launch date, they were like, there's more we wanted to put in, and there's a lot of fun stuff. And this is the only time, 5 years from now, they're not allowed to use that same engine to make a game, right? So all the tools are there to make this kind of like broader world for the people that are big fans. You can spend more money, and that was seen as like a good value proposition. It was like, it wasn't as much as a game, but some people were like, hey, this expansion has way more than the original game. It's a great deal. Some people were like, hey, this one I paid a lot of money for, but it didn't extend the game that much. It was another maybe 5 to 7 hours of gameplay. And so people had in their mind like the standard of what a good kind of expansion pack was to be. And so I think that in terms of like value, I think gamers are smart enough to be like, this right here, I've heard some really good things about, and this is cool. Or you can be like me, and if you wait long enough, the games are on sale at Steam, and they give you all the DLC, and it's just all included.
Right.
And the only problem is that you have to be like, hey guys, it's 2018. Have you guys played this super cool game called Breath of the Wild that I just discovered? That's the only problem with being a patient gamer. But you get a lot of that. Like, you get to see how I'm thinking of Tomb Raider in particular, where you were walking and it was like a normal like kind of game, and then there was a part that you could tell was added in the DLC, and they put so much effort into it and so much like really, really cool like creative ways to solve this puzzle and stuff. And I like that. It's almost like a way of saying like, we have a release date for the game, but there's no release date on the cool things that we as developers can do with it if you give us some more money. I have no problem with that, and no one has ever had a problem with that, I guess. I think the things we have problems with when it comes to microtransactions are universal. Everybody hates the idea that you can pay more in a multiplayer game and be better at the game. Everybody hates that. Everybody's okay with any cosmetic thing that affects the game in no way. They're happy to say, you know what, that's a place for microtransactions. That doesn't change the game. It doesn't make you stronger. It makes you look cooler or whatever. And they leave it,
Yeah.